This afternoon, an event hosted by Catholic University of America, Institute for Policy Research and Catholic Studies, and the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. U.S. Senator Marco Rubio is going to deliver remarks, take part in a panel discussion, and he joins us this morning on the morning show. Senator, good to visit with you again. How are you, sir?
Good. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Today, a subject near and dear to my heart. It's something that I don't think is getting talked about nearly as much as it should, because I think you correctly identify it's a problem and it's a linchpin to what's going on in our country, and its values in our country are changing.
Yeah, I think it's critical. Look, I think, unfortunately, we've allowed the social and moral well-being of our people to be separated from their economic well-being, and they're inextricably linked. We know that there is a success sequence in America that involves getting an education, getting a job, getting married, and waiting to have children until after marriage. If you do those four things, your chances of success are very high. That doesn't mean that if you don't do all four things, you're doomed to failure, but we do know that people that are living or missing one of those elements from time to time will struggle. For example, if you don't have higher education or access to it, you're going to struggle to succeed in the 21st century. Obviously, if you don't have a job, you're going to struggle to succeed in the 21st century. And we know that statistically, children that are being raised in broken homes have less of a chance statistically of going to college or making it to the middle class, and so we need to pay special attention to that and try to be as helpful as we can to those in those circumstances.
Senator, I observed when I was younger that the difference between what was legal and what was right, though not always universally accurate, was very narrow. There wasn't a wide gap between the two. In our culture today, especially as it relates to government, there's a big gap between what is legal and what is right.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, I mean, there are a lot of things that are the right thing to do that you don't necessarily want government involved in legislating. It's largely a part of what society needs to teach. But I think what your point you make is a good one, and that is, I think something else has seeped in, which is this sort of moral relativism, which says that right is determined by what makes you happy, as opposed to that there are absolute things that are right and wrong. So, for example, culturally speaking, you see movies and others that kind of glorify, a slacker, some guy that just hangs around his home until he's 40 years old and doesn't have a job and isn't, productive or making a difference in his life and so forth. There's nothing glamorous about it, and on the contrary, it's counterproductive both to him and to the country, as opposed to, the values that tell people that hard work and discipline and self-control are important for success.
I'm reminded of a line Ted Koppel delivered at a Duke commencement address decades ago when he said, when Moses came down from Sinai, he didn't come down with 10 suggestions. Yeah. And I kind of think it's relevant to today as well. Give me your reaction to the dual rulings yesterday on Obamacare.
They're as confusing as the law, and I think they're indicative of what a mess the law is in terms of how it was constructed and what its implications and impact are going to be on the country. And I just think about the economic impact that this uncertainty now creates. People just simply don't know. I mean, they don't know how to, do you go out on, for example, if you were counting on this subsidy to do whatever in life, how do you move forward on it now, not knowing if you're getting it or not getting it? And just the law is so poorly constructed. It ignored the Constitution. It was rushed through on a straight partisan vote, literally in the middle of the night. I mean, and now you're seeing the implication that it's creating, the implications that it's having on our economy and the country as a whole.
Joining us on the program, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, a couple days ago, we just talked about this story a few moments ago, but a couple days ago in Washington, a demonstration from what are referred to, I think, very gracefully as dreamers. I might call them something else, demanding that enough is enough, and protesting in front of many of the United States senators' offices that happen to be Republicans. This is a question that's getting hit with me. I'm getting hit with emails. Why weren't they just arrested? They're here illegally. They declared they're there illegally. Why don't we just arrest them?
Well, actually, many of them, I don't know that. I don't know who they were exactly on individually, but I would imagine many of them qualified for the President's Deferred Action Program. So, in essence, they may not actually be here illegally, given the President's executive order a couple of years ago. But I think beyond that point, I think that advocates for immigration reform do a terrible disservice to the cause when they pretend or behave as if someone has a right to illegally immigrate to the United States. There may come a point where this country addresses this problem because it's in the interest of the country and because for humanitarian reasons or for whatever reasons there may be, because we're a compassionate people. But there is no right to illegally come to the country. And no matter what the circumstances were behind coming here illegally, the country may allow you to stay because of asylum or some other issue, but no one has a right to come here and stay if they've done so illegally. And I think it does, and I've said this before, I think it really does a disservice to the cause when you go around pretending that you have some sort of right to come here in violation of our laws. There is no such right.
Is it fair to say that given the coordination that seems to be existing between some Central American countries and Mexico, that we are, in fact, now being invaded?
Well, it's more complicated than that. I mean, you do have in those countries as a factor, violence and drug gangs, and that's no doubt a factor. But I think the contributing factor, the one that really has led to an explosion in this, is the combination of trafficking groups that are going around telling people that there's some new law in America that if they come, they're going to be allowed to stay. The practical reality that if you arrive in the U.S. as a child or a family, the chances of you being deported, no matter how you arrived, are very slim. So, in fact, while there may not be a law, that they're lying about this, that there's such a law, that is the way the law is being applied. So there's truth to that, unfortunately. And the lack of border security to prevent this from happening. And then I think we can't ignore the fact that, and I pointed this out last week, 13% of the combined GDP of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, 13% are remittances, money being sent from the United States back. And so I think these countries have a vested interest to some extent in seeing people come here because it's going to send more money back. And I've said that publicly.
Last question. I know you got a bolt here in a moment, but I promised myself the next time I had you on the program, I was going to ask because I've not asked you before. So I'm going to ask you now, Senator. You going to run for president?
Not today. Well, I'll let you know. That's a decision that I'll have to make later this year. I really believe that the country right now is facing the fastest rate of change it's ever had, demographically, economically, and we need 21st century leadership, ideas that apply limited government and free enterprise to the unique challenges of this moment in our history. And the decision I have to make is where is the best place for me to further that cause? Is it from a Republican majority Senate, God willing, or is it as a candidate and ultimately as the President of the United States? And that's what I'll spend the next few months thinking and praying about. But I promise you'll know.
I always look forward to our time, however brief it might be. Senator, I wish you the very best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Senator Marco Rubio with us. We've had the senator on since he was the Speaker of the House, and even before that here on the morning show. We've gotten to know each other over the years, and I treasure that relationship. I think he's a very, very bright guy, and I think he's the most articulate guy on our side of the issues.